Welcome to the Pre Nup, the wedding obsessed podcast designed to help you plan your dream day. I'm your host, Adriana, and each week I'm joined by the industry's top professionals, celebs, influencers, and friends who are sharing their best tips, advice, and mistakes they've made so you don't have to. The Pre Nup is a Love Stories TV podcast. Today we are chatting with a bridal beauty expert, CEO of award-winning international wedding hair and makeup company Beautini, as well as the founder of a little skincare company that you might have seen in Neiman Marcus, Free People, and Urban Outfitters called Beia, and a bride-to-be herself. I am honored to present Miss Brittany Lo to the Pre Nup podcast. Welcome, Brittany.
So much for having me.
Thank you for being here. I am so excited, and so are our listeners and viewers because we had a lot of questions for you, Miss.
I mean, ask away. I'm so excited to finally be a bride.
I am so, congratulations.
Thank you.
You're born to be a bride. You're just like a glowing vision. So, and you have so much experience in the industry. So I want to get into your wedding planning, things like that. But I want to start with a little background, a little bit of context before we get into it.
Love it.
So tell us a little bit about your fiancé.
So Cory is my fiancé, and it's funny, so one of his best friends from growing up met my friend from college. They end up getting married in 2018 or 2019. And so I've known him for actually 10 years.
Whoa.
But we started dating. It'll be 4 years in July. So we've known each other for a while.
Okay.
Before.
So you were friends before?
Yes. And it's funny because this sounds maybe a little woo-woo, but I went to an astrologist and she's like, it was 2020. She's like, listen, you're going to have some like difficulties with your business this year and you're going to find your person, but it's going to be a friend. And I was like, like weddings are booming and, start of 2020. Absolutely crazy.
Whoa.
And then she's like, he's going to be an Aquarius. He's going to be a friend of yours. I was like, absolutely not. I've literally gone through all the lists of men I could possibly date and there is no one. And it turns out there was the pandemic. There were no weddings. So therefore, greatly impacted Beautini. And also he ended up being like a friend, like we were acquaintances, I'd say. We weren't like that close. But he was also an Aquarius. Isn't that funny?
There's a heat wave and I have chills.
Right.
Like that's crazy. Who is this astrologist?
Song of Sparrow. She is phenomenal.
Oh, I've seen her.
Yes, she's so good.
Oh my God.
You might have to go see her.
I need to go see her now. Whoa, that's wild. That's like spot on.
And she even told me like not to change conversations, but she also was like, listen, like you're working on one business, but she's like, there's a bigger platform for you that's going to happen and it's going to get really busy like last February. And I was like, what does that even mean? And that's when Beia, my second company, launched into Neiman Marcus.
Which is killing it, by the way.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh.
Thank you so much. So funny, whether you believe in astrology or not, I thought it was just like so interesting to hear a few things that she said that actually came true. And he was one of them.
He was one of them. Holy crap. Okay, so you get together after having this like friendly relationship. And then how long are you guys together before you get engaged?
So
like you just got engaged. So
right. So basically almost 4 years.
Okay.
So we end up like, he asked me out a few times over the years and that's when our friends were getting married. And I was always like, personal life, business, like let's not murky the waters at all. And I was like, I just didn't know him well enough to be like, I need to date you.
Sure.
But always like a nice guy. And then during the pandemic, his friend invited my best friend and I out to the Hamptons for a weekend. It was literally 2020. So we're like, we have nothing to do. Let's go. And he was the sweetest guy. And I was like, wait a minute. I can't believe I didn't spend time like getting to know you because you're amazing. And so that was July 2020. So here we are now.
Here we are. And for anyone who doesn't follow you on socials, they need to because all of your companies and you yourself are just like such a vibe and give so many great tips. But you also shared just the most iconic engagement. So tell people about your fabulous Parisian proposal from Cory.
Oh my gosh. So I've always said Paris I studied abroad in. Like that was where I just like fell in love with like getting to know me as a person and loving myself.
Yeah.
And I was like, I can't wait to bring like my future lover here one day. And I said that in college. And so then a few years ago, him and I went to Paris and it was such a magical trip. And I was like, one day it would be so special to get proposed to there. And that was a dream since probably like middle school or high school.
Wow.
But then, as you start dating, you're like, honestly, I just want to marry you.
Yeah.
Wherever it is fine. So I honestly thought we had a wedding, my best friend's wedding in Italy in May. So I was like, oh, maybe he'll propose in Italy. That's great.
Sure.
And as the days went on, I was like, wait a minute. I don't think it's happening. I know this year, but definitely maybe not this trip.
Yeah.
And so the morning of us like on our way, leaving for the airport, I was curling my hair. I was like, there's a 1% chance that he still says like, hey, we're extending this trip. And I curl my hair and he's like, Brittany, like, what are you doing? And I was like, oh my God, it's not happening. Start bawling my eyes out. And he just stops me. He's like, Brittany, like you don't have to be curling your hair right now because you're gonna have plenty of time in the hotel in Paris.
Stop.
So
you at that point,
I was like, all right, it's happening. I don't know if it's today or tomorrow or how long we're gonna be in Paris, but like I knew once he said Paris, like game over.
Oh,
so then he like
gosh.
actually like created a schedule where I had like 2.5 hours just to like curl my hair, have fun, get ready, and like really soak in the moment. And it was the best to be. I was like dancing to like I'm engaged playlist on Spotify.
God. I love that because you don't hear that very often. Usually people either pretend that they're like completely shocked out of the blue, out of nowhere, or they are. So it's like having this, it's not that you weren't surprised because you didn't know for sure whether it was going to happen, but you got to prepare in the way that you actually wanted to.
Yes.
So my proposal was unfortunately, I love you, Jake. You did a great job. But it was a surprise. So like nails
Which
were
is
not
amazing.
done. It was great, but like hair was curly, didn't have an outfit. Like you can really get the entire vibe that you want when you have like a little bit of intel. And it just shows that Cory knows you so well that he's like, she would want to have the time to curl her hair, to relax, to get ready, because you have those engagement pictures forever.
100. And I also have a beauty company. I have 2. So he really knew like, okay, give her this time.
Yes.
But it's funny because I didn't sleep the 2 nights before because I was like, oh my gosh, it's not happening. It's not happening. Yeah. And so here I was like, I need some extra concealer because I am extra tired and it actually is happening. And so he ends up like calling Uber. He brings us to a few different spots. And then I turn around and it was like the first spot he brought us to, he proposed right in front of the bridge overlooking the Eiffel Tower. And I really wanted to capture the moment through a video. And so he ended up having the photographer take like a photo on his iPhone first, and then we did the photo. Then he also did the photos.
Smart.
Which was so smart. And so then we do the photo shoot, and he's like, oh, we have some time before dinner. Let's just go to a cafe. So of course I'm difficult. I'm like, no, I want this cafe. It's pouring. Let's run into this one. And so then a few minutes later, he's like, I'm running to the bathroom. I'm on my phone. And then I look up, and my parents walk in.
Stop it.
And my future mother-in-law, his stepdad. It was like he had them come from New York and Florida to be a part of it.
You were probably bawling. Like
how that was the biggest surprise because that was like I might have said that to my mom, someone a long time ago. Like that is the absolute dream because I'm so close to my family.
Oh yeah.
But to actually ask, coordinate that with my parents and like have them actually fly for 2 days. I was like, I would never actually ask them to do that. And I honestly forgot about that.
Yeah.
And so they flew and it was the most magical time all together as a like a new united family in our favorite city. So it was so thoughtful. And then my planner friend, she lives in New York City, Mina from Fifth Ave Weddings and Events, and she was doing my friend's wedding in Italy.
Okay.
And so once we have this amazing night at our favorite restaurant in Paris with our parents, best time just soaking it all in. We come home and the room is filled with candles and flowers. And it wasn't just because the flowers were pretty. My friend flew from Italy to Paris to do it all. And I think that's where it's like, it's not about the flowers, but it was a level of thought that people put into this proposal that made it just so special.
That's the important thing to take away. Just people should focus less on like the quote unquote surprise element and more of the overall love, like
Yes.
communal support. Just having those people do that for you.
know.
You must have felt like a princess.
And it's funny because during the proposal, I almost like I did black out, or I was like, wait, what just happened? I was like, holy crap. And it's hard to really take in that moment.
Yes.
And then it's done. I was like, wait a minute. Wait, can you say it all over again? Because I was so, I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
Because I was so in shock. And he was so like nervous that he forgot what he said.
Yeah, you black out in that moment.
And so you're like, then it's done. But the nice thing is that he had these other like moments to it. So it's not really just this, will you marry me? It's really like what comes before, what comes after that becomes this like all together collective memory.
Yes.
And he did such a great job.
Oh my God, your ring. Can we get a little like shot of the ring here? And if this is for anyone who is viewing, but it's stunning. It's like a very gorgeous ring. Did he have any help?
So it is funny because initially I was like, you just do it yourself.
Yeah.
Like, this is on you. I was like, I want like an oval with a gold band.
Yeah.
Didn't know what color prongs. But then he's like, listen, this is like a big decision and I want you to be happy.
You're going to wear this thing
Will you
forever.
help me? And my dermatologist, I was seeing her. I'm like, no, I totally trust him. And she's like, listen, you're going to be wearing this the rest of your life. Like, I think you should maybe be a part of it.
Yes.
And
the
so
derm knows.
he ended up like finding a jeweler and then sourced the diamond. And then I was like, all right, this is stunning. Like I only saw one and we're like, or actually, I guess two. This one we were like done.
Yeah.
And then he did the setting and everything else with the jeweler.
That's really special.
So it was really, really special. And of course we did like the Tiffany's and the Cartier, like all the fun shopping together. Just to get to know, like just to learn. Because even before you get engaged, you're like, okay, I think this is what I want, but I've never tried it on really.
Right.
And so just like learning together and like easing into this process was really special.
There's so many factors of it too that it gets confusing because you think you know exactly what you want, but then it's like, oh, well, the clarity is actually what I care about more than
Yes, and I didn't realize. So like for the oval, we went into a store and he's like, make sure it's an excellent cut because of your oval and how it, like the facet and it being super shiny. And we knew we needed to go really, ideally have least amount of color as possible because of the shape and all these different things that we had no idea about.
When it comes to shape, you're right. Things alter in what's important in the diamond.
Yes.
Depending on what the shape is.
And then you also have to have like those honest, realistic conversations on like budget and like what are expectations so that way it's not like pressuring which me and my fiance will laugh now. It's like not pressuring them too much, but also like being realistic.
Fire under the ass never hurt anybody. You know,
you're gonna be like shaking his head and be like, yeah, right.
We love you, Cory. What I love about you, and I think a lot of people are drawn to, not only that you're just like gorgeous and you have this intel in the industry, and now you're a bride, so a lot of people not only relate to you but look up to you, but you're very candid and honest about your relationship. Like you even said, yeah, we work on it. Like it takes work. And I am a huge proponent of premarital counseling to some degree, whether that's like, if it's for religious reasons or if you're in therapy or whatever. But it's so important to have certain conversations with some sort of mediator before you get married.
Oh, yes.
So without getting into specifics, can you just explain to anyone listening what going through counseling therapy with Cory did for your relationship and does for your relationship?
It was honestly the best. It got to a point where like we, two individuals are grown up in completely different childhoods and have different experiences. And when you think about just therapy as individuals, so much of our belief system stems from when we were a child, right?
Yes.
And so then you take two individuals trying to merge and create this collective home together from these very different maybe upbringings, and then you're like, wait, why is there conflict, or how do we work through this?
Sure.
When our belief system stemmed from when we were 5 years old,
right? And
so we ended up going. I think that Cory, which I absolutely love. I think this was like one of the sexiest moments. He was like, listen, like, his parents are divorced and he's like, I want to commit to you of being like the best husband I can be. But he's like, I don't know what that looks like. And for me, like, I also think that strengthening your relationship as much as possible before you say I do, like, could never hurt. And I love therapy. I love like coaching, and I just love like hearing different perspectives and learning and growing. Like, we spend so much time, furthering ourselves in our careers.
Yes.
With the relationships, you assume like, oh, it's just going to happen. You just figure it out. But we always have coaches or bosses or mentors in work. So why aren't we doing that in our personal lives?
Totally.
And so what it really did for us was having a mediator to like be like, listen, okay, let's talk through these different situations. Like, what's happened? Like, where do you guys get stuck? And how do we get unstuck without saying things that we can't take back? And even like childhood traumas, like how I think through family and like what I saw with my parents might have been different than what he saw with his parents. And so how do we talk it through and like make sure like we really feel confident and comfortable with like what does that mean for life together as us? Because he might not want to be the way that my dad is to my mom, but what does that mean for Brittany and Cory?
Right.
And so even like we have therapy tomorrow and we're like, oh, this is so exciting. We usually do a date night after, and like it's just a really good way where you just like walk away, and at first we're like, oh, like this is cool, but like let's see what it does.
Yeah.
But then you're like, wait, this like we're really learning so much more. We've become so strong as a couple, but then also you can see how it helps your other relationships, your work relationships. And so you're like, why wouldn't I want to do this before making one of the biggest, if not the biggest decision of your life?
There's a huge misconception and stigma with couples therapy that's like, oh, there's something wrong in your relationship. Well, no, we're actually learning conflict resolution before the conflict even arises and nipping it in the bud.
Yeah. And it's funny because now I can openly speak about it, but I do think we were dating, I'm 32, I'll be 33 in January, he's 34. And so after the 2-year mark, people are like, what's going on? Where's it happening?
Sure.
And so I do think that if I did tell all my like close friends, but I wasn't open on like say on social media because people were already like, what's going on? Why is it taking so long?
Yeah.
So then if you say that plus therapy, people are like, oh, there's something wrong with it.
Yeah.
And I think that's like such a taboo that you really want to like, I really want to challenge more people to think differently on, because I feel like we're in such a better position to like have this lasting successful marriage because we've done the hard work up front. But it is like weird. And I think that if anyone is also going through couples therapy right now to like figure through issues, like sure, if it's fundamentally differences in certain issues, that's one thing, but I do think there's a healthy piece of it that there really is no shame in keeping it private or sharing about it, but I do think it is so helpful.
Yeah, God forbid you have your own timeline and you try to work on your relationship. Like it's the craziest thing in the world. And it's kind of a similar conversation because some of my friends are either like pregnant or trying to get pregnant, but it's the same thing with like fertility issues. Like no one ever wanted to talk about it.
Until they get pregnant.
Yes. Absolutely. But then once you do, you realize how helpful it can be with other people and like you share things. And I feel the same way with therapy and counseling for couples. It's like if we were just a little bit more open about seeking out help, then we might even be able to help our friends and like empower them to get that little zhuzh that they need.
I agree. And it's funny because part of what we talk about with my company Beia is we're really talking about like intimacy and these like or even like, hey, I have these, I sweat really easily and I stink and I'm like self-conscious about it. And it's like these intimate concerns or intimacy. And it's same thing with dating. It's like once you like meet your person or someone serious, like before that you might be like, oh, I just wanted this date and we had crazy sex and this and that. And you're like, I had a great night. But then once it becomes serious, you not even with your closest friends are you really talking about like, ooh, like, intimacy or like what's going on with problems, because you kind of build up like this wall to show like a united front, which I get. But I do think the more that we can open up and share, and I think that was part of like I did a post on like, hey, like this looks all like nice right now, and it is, but like don't forget, like we did a lot of like work to get here. It's not like it wasn't easy by any means.
Yes.
And I think the more that you do share, and granted, like same thing. It's like, I'm engaged. Now I tell you, right? And I think that the more, if I did feel probably more confident, I would have been like, yeah, like anyone who asked me, I was like, do couples therapy, whatever.
For sure.
But and now I'm like, it's been so amazing. We're excited to continue. But I think the more that you can work on communication, understanding each other's values, and like how are you thinking through finances and children and religion, only sets you up for success.
It's so true. And I think you are kind of the perfect person. I'm very grateful to you for sending this message out because a lot of people look up to you. You are a friggin' boss running 2 companies, doing like so much in your social life and a million things in between, social media, everything. So for a lot of people, they look at you and they're like, this girl's perfect. Her life is, picture perfect. But you're like, well, my life is great. It's not perfect. I'm working on things, and that's why my life is good because I am putting in the work. So it's important to show
100. And it's also like, I think that I will be the first one to say, like, before it happened, you're like, I was like dying to be engaged. I was like, I just want to marry you. Like, why is it taking so long? And it was like triggering to see, I think it's just human nature to sometimes get triggered and be like, wait, like, I'm so happy for this person that is on Instagram and posting, but I'm also like, wait, what's wrong with me?
When is it my turn?
And so I do think that like now it's like fun to do this content and talk about like being a bride and stuff, but I also want to make sure I remember to remind other people who've been in my shoes, like that wasn't me. That was me like literally a few months ago.
Yeah.
So it is like fun once you get to the other side, but once you cross that side, just to be like, oh, it's rainbows and butterflies, and not remembering those feelings and how other people are triggered by maybe my content. Like I think it's important to at least recognize.
Absolutely. And like you said, like you just got engaged. You are a newly engaged girl. So I also think it's important to celebrate that and like allow yourself to really lean into it and enjoy the process. So as far as planning goes, this is the question that every engaged person hates, but I'm going to just ask you anyway.
Do you have a date?
How's planning going?
Honestly, so it's funny. So being in the industry, I started being curious. So we knew, like, I think the funny part is when you get engaged, of course you're surprised. And yes, I blacked out. And yes, I was like, oh my God, it's now. Like, this is the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And you never know exactly when until it happens. But I do think there's something to be said. Like, we were still talking, like going to therapy, working towards engagement. We were, talking through like, where would our wedding be? Like, what do we want this to look like? What would a dream, like you have all those conversations.
Yes.
And so we actually I had a client come in and she was like, oh, this venue, like last May, I went to see it and they already had a 30-person wait list for the next year.
Stop
And I was
it.
like, oh my gosh. And I was like, tell me what venue it is. And it was literally one of my like dream venue. So I was like, Cory, like, I know it's happening this year.
Yeah.
And I was like, if you do want to get married next year, are you open to at least like looking at venues? And he's like, absolutely. If he's already knows we're going to get engaged. Like,
yes.
I feel like it is interesting to maybe open up that conversation on like, who are we looking to invite? So you can kind of look at venues, because one of the things that I loved, because I felt very overwhelmed when I got engaged. I had a wedding conference with industry friends like a week after.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, so do you have a date yet? When are you getting married? And actually I was like, actually, yes. And I was like, I loved that because at least I like didn't feel like as overwhelmed.
Yes.
And so if you're listening and you're hoping to be engaged soon and you're having those conversations with your partner, I would be like maybe offer in like a fun, casual way, being like, do you want to sit down and just like make a like tentative list?
Yes.
And like start thinking like if you do want a wedding in a certain area, like take a look at like what are the options are. So that way, like if you know it's happening, you can maybe get a step ahead and get that dream venue because you're not waiting until the actual moment.
Yes.
And we didn't sign or do anything until after.
Right.
But we kind of we were already aligned on the vision and like what we want a wedding day to feel like. And we wanted a weekend and whatnot. And I think that like allowed me to really enjoy the actual engagement because I wasn't rushing to figure out like where we're getting married. What time of year are we getting married?
Right.
It all kind of had been in the works a little bit.
I talk about the concept of the pre-engaged a lot because we have so many prenup brides who are almost engaged. They're not yet, but they know that they're going to be.
Yes.
And so many of them feel a certain way of like, I can't start thinking about it until I have the ring on my finger.
No.
But I am an advocate for looking for that venue because we're even just calling and saying, hey, what do the dates look like?
Yes.
Like setting yourself up. No, you don't have to go sign and, drink the champagne and do it, but at least give yourself a leg up because if you're someone who maybe you do want to get married in the next year. Like you really want to have those things lined up. So I love that you're open about that too, because a lot of people feel a certain way about it. But I've had couples do soft holds before getting engaged because
that was us.
and you should. Like if you know that you're going to get engaged,
why not? I always thought like, oh, it should be this fairy tale. You get engaged and then you figure it all out. But that almost feels backwards. Again, like if you want to set yourself up for success and like you're already, like you shouldn't be like waiting to have like any kind of wedding conversations until after you get engaged. It like kind of just happens naturally because you're so excited for this next chapter and you're already probably maybe involved in the ring process or like even, you know, the budget of a ring was definitely a conversation. So you're having these like intimate conversations anyways.
Yes.
And I do think a wedding is such a big investment. And a lot of times, like, especially nowadays, like couples do contribute. And so having these like financial questions and just like being like, okay, what's our vision?
Yes.
So you can start saving and just like be mindful and prepared, knowing what to expect versus blindly getting engaged and be like, how much for a wedding?
Totally.
And then like totally having this sticker shock, which I mean, I still did, but like being able to like talk this through with your partner, I think just allows both of you to more time to process it versus like rushing to get things done.
Yes.
And then not really enjoying it.
I think you hit the nail on the head. It's this fictional idea of the fairy tale. Like, who are we kidding? 75% of people live together before getting married.
Yes.
Like, we're playing fantasy when we're like, we can only do it in this way. Like,
No.
you have already built a life together.
100%.
This is a party to celebrate your union. So, like, why are you playing these silly little games where you can't do this or you can't do that? Just freaking plan it.
Right. And it's like, if you are part of the ring process, like that's like a 2 to 3 month process in itself. So like, if you're already like picked the ring, and I know that not everyone does, but like you kind of know, like I was a part of it. He always mentioned like the fall. So I wasn't like fully sure.
Okay.
But even still, I was like, if we're already at that stage where it's like, he's committed, right? Then it's like, why wouldn't we like kind of like be excited to look and whatever.
Exactly.
And we still looked at other places and whatever, but then it allowed us to like really be like, enjoy it. We had I had my answers and be like, I'm enjoying it, but I also got my like soft hold as you kind of figure it all out. So I would recommend that, even though that's a little non-traditional.
Yeah, but what's wrong with being non-traditional?
Let's
lean into
let's
that.
evolve, right?
Yes. Another thing I wanted to ask you about in the planning process, have you found a planner?
I have.
Yay! Okay, so this is something
and
that
I haven't told anyone yet, so this is exciting.
Oh, this is the exclusive. Okay, so I want to know what your criteria was for finding a planner and how you ended up doing that, because that is something that halts a lot of brides up front. They're like, how do I know which planner to choose? So how did you go about that whole process?
So I naturally am in the industry, but it's funny because when it's your wedding, like naturally, like it's all about a personality fit. And so my first thing was I really wanted, like, some of my closest friends are planners.
Yes.
And that makes, like, I actually lost like so many nights of sleep just worrying about this decision, because I honestly still like eats at me because I haven't actually announced it. But I was like, you know what? Like, a wedding day is a time for me to be with my closest friends and family and have the best time ever.
Yes.
And I don't want like a friend to be like working my wedding because they're not going to fully enjoy it, right? And that's like just for me to like have the best planner, the best whatever. And I would rather have someone there and share the moments with me, because also, like, say you get in a tiff with this friend, then you're ruining a relationship over a wedding.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, like, the wedding is not that important. It's important
Brittany,
for what it is, but like it's a party,
on.
right?
Absolutely.
And I do think it's hard because some of my friends were like, I want to plan your wedding. But I was like, I think it's means so much more. I thought in my eyes is like to have you as my friend.
Yes.
And then we can like, it's another party. You plan so many in a year.
Yes.
It's just going to be a party and it's going to be so much fun. And so I actually had like almost, I think, 30 planners reach out, which was so nice.
Oh my gosh.
And so I honestly, like, I had a friend who worked with me for a little bit. And so I was like, okay, she'd be great. Or like just kind of was like, oh, I'll pick someone.
Yeah.
I don't know. I was kind of pushing it off. And then I had a planner who I was like very friendly with, and I was just sharing I was getting engaged and I had questions, and she was like, hey, like she's like, I know you're kind of talking to your friend. Let's see if she is even available to do it.
Right.
But let me just like sit down with you. Let's just go through a few things.
Yeah.
And then even I was like, oh, this is what I'm thinking. And then she would like talk to certain vendors on my behalf. And she's like, you're a vendor. Let's see what other vendors are willing to like help you.
Yeah.
And so I think what really sealed the deal was instead of just being like, hey, I'm here if you need me, she actually like, her actions spoke louder than words. She's like, she actually helped me.
Yeah.
And then like as soon as I was seeing her at a conference, she's like, okay, I think this guy would do this. And I talked to this one. You should think about XYZ. And she like actually had these conversations on my behalf, knowing that I already was maybe going to choose someone else.
Sure.
So she still was helping me as a friend. And then when we got back from the conference, she's like, hey, do you want to just like hop on a call? I can just work through your budget with you.
Yeah.
And she did it again, knowing that I probably was going to hire her, but she was like, let me just help you as a friend. And honestly, that happened even with the ring. There was someone who was just helping Cory as a friend with advice. And then Cory ended up going with that person. And I think it just showed, I was like, you know what? Like she's been like getting so much done without her even being my planner that I was like, this was such a natural progression for her to actually be the one.
Yes.
And then my friend, like she works for a different planning company and it was going to get too like confusing.
Yeah.
And she's busy. So it honestly worked out beautifully. And when I was looking for a planner, I think one, it's like naturally you have to look at your budget first off.
Of course.
You want to look at the vibe. So like there's some who might do like ultra glam or super like outdoorsy or do like amazing ballroom weddings. But if you're looking to, you know, do a blank slate in maybe upstate New York, it might not be the right fit.
A little different.
And I say like, look at the clients, like look at their vibe. Like, could you see being one of their clients? And the more you can, and I always say it's kind of like dating. It's really about a personality match. Like
You're right.
you might love this one planner and you'd be like, I'm obsessed with her. I might meet her and be like, oh, she's great, but we're not like vibing the same way.
Exactly.
And that's okay. Like there's so many incredible planners out there that it really comes down to like, yes, experience really says a lot.
Of course.
But ultimately, someone who you feel like I'm a little, you know, particular and I need attention to detail and someone who's going to stay on top of it. And that was like really important to me. But also someone who like understood value and wasn't like, oh, just pick this and like not really understand the value of the dollar.
Yes.
And so that's where I found this person who was like younger, like she just like had so much energy. She was just so helpful and like helping me see how could I make our budget work for a bunch of different vendors and make the vision that I had come to life without being like, you can't afford that, you can't do that. And it just became like a natural, like I honestly didn't even like interview anyone. It just became like a natural progression.
That's amazing.
Which has been great.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And for anyone who is not in the industry and doesn't have the connections too, I think they can still really take a lot from that because your communication up front, even if they're not going to bend over backwards, like you knew this person, so it's a little bit different, but that communication up front is a really good indicator of how they're going to treat you through the process. So if someone is blowing you off, they don't have time for you, they're worried about is the budget, they don't care about you as a couple. If you really don't have a good feeling with them up front, even if their work is stunning, gorgeous, it's what you've always envisioned, it's not the right fit because you work with them so much. They're a fixture of your life, like so closely through the planning process. It's one of the harder vendors.
And also I will say that part of me, I was like, you know, I'm just so grateful for you to even like want to work with me. And I was like, oh, but at the end of the day, like we are spending like a lot of money like for this special day. And so if you feel like you almost have to like put on a show or be like, oh, I can't believe she's even working with us. Like, I think that's also like, you want to be able to feel really open to being like, hey, like this feels too out of budget. Or like she even was like, all right, is your budget? Or are we going to go up more?
Right.
And then Cory and I were like, no, this is our budget because we know as we get closer, we're going to go up maybe 20%.
Exactly.
Right? And so
but it's so funny that you said it. You're like, my budget's my budget because it will go up. But we don't. It's a fact.
It's a fact. And so and so she's like, okay, cool. So now I know. And I think what I liked about that, she wasn't pushing us to be like, no, I think you need to do this when it wasn't in budget. And then there was other vendor where she's like, you know what? Like, I know that this one's like maybe more affordable affordable option, but like I really think that like, can we have a call just to talk through this other option?
Yes.
And so because she's been so understanding for other vendors, when she does push back, I was like, I want to listen because as a vendor, you really pay for what you get, right? And
that's right.
And a lot of times with hair and makeup, people are like, oh, this price is more expensive. I'm good. Like I'm going somewhere else.
Yes.
And then they come back to us weeks before and they're like, oh my gosh, I haven't heard from my artist and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, you do want to invest in like quality vendors because once you do that, they take over the show and you know that they're going to do an incredible job because this is what they do. And so I understand like not cutting corners, but just knowing like your budget's your budget. I think picking like 3 vendors of your wedding that you absolutely want like the best or whatever your vision is, you want certain people or certain things.
Yes.
Like one of ours is like Shake Shack. We're like, we need Shake Shack.
Oh my God,
and then
I love
it's
it.
like, all right, so maybe that means like, the after party just a Shake Shack or whatever. There's other places where you pull and
make
concessions and compromises. And it's just the reality of planning.
Absolutely. And I think to your point, a good planner or vendor will say not, oh, well, we can't do that. We can't do that. They'll say like, well, how can we make it happen? And they'll pivot and they'll push you where they feel like they need to, and they'll pull back where you don't and say, well, maybe we can't do it this way, but maybe we can do something else in this way. So having that trust is so important.
And having a planner who's like, is like the liaison between a vendor and the client. It's like, listen, like we're not going to ask them for a discount, but this is why they're priced the way they are, right? Because I think as a vendor side, when someone's like, I need a discount for this and this, I'm like, you're not actually respecting me. But then when they're asking for a discount for specific situations, I know that like this is a case where we're going to help them out because there is a situation that we want to help out in.
Yes.
And I think understanding like that dynamic is important. Like you don't want like just a planner who's going to be like, yeah, I'm going to get you the best deal in XYZ, because that's not really respectful. Like it's people's hard work and their companies and their businesses that support their families. So it's not saying that, but it's more of like, all right, this is the price of A and this is the price of B. So these are the hard costs. Like how do we maybe get less flowers, or how do we think about like a different like menu for the welcome party in order for it to all come together?
And that is, it's so smart. Just really realizing what's important, where are we putting budget, how are we allocating. There's a podcast, it's called the Vendor Table Pod. It's more for wedding professionals. So like definitely great for you. But the hosts, Lauren and Mike, are friends and photographers. Shout out to Lauren and Mike. Hi guys. But they're awesome. And they actually told me a story of a couple who sent them an email and they were like, hey, we are really obsessed with your work. We love you. Like, we did check out your website and we realized we're not within budget, but like, we would absolutely love it if there's any way that we can make it work, if we can make certain changes. And that really spoke to them. So not to say that that would work for everyone, but there are situations where it can work. And maybe if it's like an off season or something, but make sure you're respecting people's crafts, because if someone came to me and they were like, you're too expensive, I'm like, well, then I'm not your person.
Right.
Like,
no, 100%. I agree. And it's like all about fit all the way around.
If you don't think I'm worth it, then why are you even reaching out?
Right. And I do think, and then at the same time, it's like, hey, if it's like a little bit like, hey, like, my grant, like whatever, if there's something, I also think having communication, like right now with our caterer, he's actually a family friend. And I was like, hey, like, he's like, let's just work on the budget, or let's work on the menu that you feel excited about, and then let's work through the numbers after.
Yes.
And so we can make this all work. And I was like, I love that level of transparency, because with Beautini, I would rather, as long as it's like the right fit, if you're like, hey, like, I really, I just had a client be like, listen, like my mother-in-law is handicapped and she's in a different location. Is there any way XYZ? I know you have a travel fee or whatever. And I was like, oh my gosh, yes, let's like sit down and figure this out. We're not going to charge you to move route. Like it was just like I appreciate you coming to me and being like, hey, how can we make this work?
Yes.
Because I would absolutely want to make that work, and we're going to make it work, but it's a more that you can share as a couple to your vendors of like, hey, this is what's going on, or this is like a challenge that we're trying to figure out, and bringing the vendor into that conversation. Then you guys can make it a really nice solution that worked for both sides.
Yes, absolutely. So as a professional in the wedding sphere and a bridal beauty expert, would you dare, we were just having this conversation, would you dare do your own wedding hair and makeup?
So it's funny. A lot of my friends are like, "Who's gonna are you gonna do your makeup?" Obviously, Beautini's doing my hair and makeup,
Of course,
So,
of course.
but it is funny. I definitely even doing my own makeup. I think it's finding or like working with one of my artists who's like totally cool with me, like judging it at the end.
Yes.
Which like the beauty about Beautini is like we really are about like listening to our clients. Like no one has like big egos where they're gonna get offended if you want to tweak it to make sure you feel like 1,000% you.
Sure.
And so just it's almost like someone was like, "Oh, I think I want to do my own manicure for my wedding." I was like, I don't think this is the time to like do it, even if you're really good at it.
Yeah.
Because you forget about how many emotions are part of the morning. And so
Stakes are
I'm
high.
going to get my hair and makeup done so I can breathe and relax.
Yes.
And I think that comes to more of the trial of being like, hey, do you mind if we use my like CC cream that I use every day? Or like, hey, this is like how I feel comfortable like applying my blush. And even like if I need to like judge it to feel like me and then be a little OCD, they already know that.
Absolutely.
And they're cool with it.
And that just speaks again to like getting to know your vendors and vibing and picking the right ones for you specifically.
Yes.
So let me ask you this. Are we sharing wedding date or roundabout date?
Yes, we are doing next August.
Okay.
Which we just signed like last week or 2 weeks ago.
Congratulations.
So it's very new.
We're a year out.
I know. It's wild. And
my
I
gosh.
I always was like, I really just care about like engaged and feeling like, okay, this like we're getting married. He's the one. And then the wedding, I was like, oh, it feels stressful. Like it could be 2 years from now.
Yeah.
But then I was like, wait, Cory's like, why would we wait? Like, why wouldn't we get married in a year? And I was like, now I'm so excited. But it feels like it's gonna move quickly.
It does. I mean, you know how it moves fast, but it's so, so, so exciting. Are you sharing your venue?
So I'm getting married at Glenmere Mansion in upstate New York.
Gorgeous, gorgeous.
So it's this pink, like Italian villa on like a bunch of acres of like grass in upstate. And my number one wish list was it being in upstate, so it was accessible for my grandparents and my relatives. And I wanted there to be hotel options that were not like super expensive. And so the venue has like a few rooms that some people stay, but there's like a bunch of like accessible hotels like 9 minutes away, and no one has to fly, but it's far away enough where people will have to spend the weekend with us.
Yes.
Because quality time is a love language of mine.
Oh,
so it's like
totally.
we get a whole weekend with friends, and it's like it's gonna be like a Thursday through Sunday, so quality time, but also like nothing too crazy because I know I'll get stressed. Like I knew destination wedding was like not in the cards, and now like hopefully all my relatives can come, and it'd be like a really fun party.
Oh my gosh, it's going to be fabulous. And just to your point about having like somewhat of a destination wedding, but you mentioned your grandparents and, accessibility of your guests to the venue. A lot of people don't think about that when they're choosing a venue, and it really is important because especially you, like you made it clear, one of the things that you want is having your loved ones around you on that day. So you could have said like, yeah, I love Paris and like we're going to do it in Paris. But how realistic is that for all of the people that you love and really want there? Like,
right.
Not so much.
And I think a wedding is the first time you as a couple are hosting an event for all your loved ones in one room. And I think it really depends on like who your guest list looks like and like what everyone's like financial like backgrounds look like. Because sometimes like a destination, if half the family's in London and half's in a different country, like going destination actually makes more sense. Or like I just knew that if I chose destination, like we wouldn't have everyone that we love there.
Right.
And I was like, at the end of the day, like the most important piece of the wedding is having your loved ones there.
Totally.
So that was just like what works with our families, like our friends, and it's still going to be so much fun. And then I honestly think when you're at it, we have so many destination weddings that we're going to, and I feel like being a guest and not having the stress of the logistics. It's like you have a couple, like a friend who's basically planning a vacation for you.
Exactly.
So it is awesome.
Yeah.
So it's like we love going, but I think for us, we're like, let's just like be able to drive, and then I can work with my vendor friends in the industry and be able to like create like a really special party not too far away from home.
Yeah, that's pretty huge. So your wedding is a year away, just about a year away. And you also are, I mean, we mentioned it a couple times, but I just want to explain for anyone who doesn't know. Brittany runs two very incredible beauty companies. So one is Beautini and one is Beia. For anyone who isn't familiar with either, can you just like give them a little spiel on each?
Yeah, so Beautini does hair and makeup services for weddings and events. So our headquarters are in Manhattan, right in Flatiron, but we'll travel worldwide. And I started that, it'll be 10 years in March.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you.
Almost. Oh my
And then,
gosh.
like 2 years ago, I officially launched Beia, which is premium vegan skincare that addresses intimate concerns, whether it's sweat, odor, body blemishes that affect our confidence in the bedroom and beyond.
Love it. It's so necessary. And the reason I bring them up is because if anyone runs a business, is a founder, is a CEO, like you know how taxing that is. But to do it times two, plus
crazy.
all the stuff that you do. So now you have planning a wedding on top of it. You run your social and you're very engaged and you have this incredible audience that you're like always responding to and you're always at events and you're just like this girl about town. So A, when do you sleep? And B, could you give any advice to brides who are feeling just very overwhelmed with the planning process and their hectic, busy lives?
Yeah, so I got home, so this engagement happened and then we had got home and that weekend we had a wedding and then the following week we were going away and then I had a conference for a few days for weddings and I was like, oh my gosh, people are gonna ask so many questions. I don't have any plans. And then I was like, you know what? I think wedding planning is ebbs and flows, right? Sometimes it's I think as long as you can be decisive,
Yes.
if you can narrow it down to a few options that maybe you referred to or they look nice or whatever, you've been referred a few options per vendor category, don't overwhelm yourself by keep searching. Once you pick someone, move on because it isn't possible to not double think things if you are searching on the Knot or Zola and constantly or even Google just seeing how many options there are out there. And even next week I know I'm gone for a week and a half and I was we were supposed to doing wedding decision planning process and I was I didn't get to talk to our planner last week and I had this question and it's fine. We're gonna be you know what, we have to put this on hold for a week or two and we'll talk about it before when I get back. And I think that's the thing is there's gonna be times when it's okay, let's get a bunch of stuff done. So the week of July 4th, we got 3 vendors down.
Amazing.
And that was amazing. And have I done anything since? Absolutely not. And that's okay too.
So I'm sure, when you start planning your wedding, you're okay, I'm going to get these things done, especially when you pick your date. You're
yes.
I'm going to do this, this, and this. So did you have certain things in mind up front that you were oh, I'm going to have this done by this time?
Oh, yeah.
And did that?
No.
No,
absolutely not. I was guys, I already have a soft day at my venue. Guys, I am so ahead of the ball. And then weeks later, so did you sign any contracts? And I'm nope, I have not. It took me, May, June, a month and a half to sign any contracts.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I've been in this industry and I know what things cost to an extent. I'm okay, this is what it is. Being a bride, you or even a girl or whoever, you're holy crap, say this one more time.
Yeah.
And so I think you need to allocate time in your planning process just to get used to this sticker shock because, oh my God, I was how many forks do people need? Can't they just eat all off the same plate? I'm the charger looks like a plate. Do we really need that? And you're just wait, what? But I do think before we signed the venue, Glenmere Mansion is a place, it's absolutely stunning, but there's nothing comes with it. You have to bring in every fork, every plate, every chair, and really build it out, which is very expensive. And so between rentals, the venue, food and beverage, planner, there's certain, and then design, I was I want to understand these numbers before I sign anywhere because I don't know, can this work or do I need to look somewhere else?
Sure.
And I think that was okay because the venue, honestly, the woman there is incredible. She wasn't I need to know ASAP. She's soft hold. If you have any questions, let's hop another call. She just allowed us to really sign when we were ready.
That's
and
nice.
That's not always the case. But F&B is a huge, food and beverage is such a big cost and your venue is huge. And honestly, florals, design, which includes rentals and whatnot, those are big on top of a planner. So it's if I was not in this industry and I didn't know exactly which venue. And even me knowing the venue, I still hired the planner first, basically, or at the same time as the venue, because part of like having a planner from the start is that they help you figure out which venue to work with, look at the contract, ask all the questions that you might not be familiar with.
Yes.
And so even so, I was like just trying to piece it all together myself and just, yeah, I think that was a big piece of that. And once I got that done, I was like, okay, we have a budget that we can make work with the wedding at the venue that we want. So now the smaller pieces, yes, it's next year. Yes, I do need to like pick and choose. But if work is busy one week, like wedding stuff can be put on hold. And other weeks, like there was a week where I was like, oh my gosh, I like just want to plan all day. I don't want to work.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, like I'm sure you might have some days just to like, don't tell your boss.
But that, to your point of just like feeling like a hectic bride, that's an important thing too. Like hiring those vendors who you can trust to really help you make those decisions, because you're an industry professional and you're like, I didn't realize that's what that costs. So imagine just the average layperson. It's funny. I actually saw, I can't remember who posted it today, but I'll credit it. But it was the average cost of a Cape Cod wedding.
Okay.
And for 125 people, they calculated everything. And it ended up being about $4,000 per person. And that's a lot of money. And that's a shock for a lot of people, especially if they're not in the Northeast. But something to remember is a lot of weddings are based on Northeast weddings. That's where people get their inspiration from. So if you want every little detail to be like this, like, yeah, maybe it won't cost as much as a wedding in Cape Cod, but it is going to add up. So you're right, like getting used to that sticker shock and like, okay, sit with a decision first before you go into the next thing, because then you're going to be like, oh my God, we just spent like all of our funds on this. And it gets to be overwhelming.
Yes. And going back to like the therapist and having that third party moderator in your relationship, honestly, a planner, I feel like really takes that place. Like on top of, obviously therapy is amazing for the relationship, but having someone who can moderate and be like, listen, because even Cory was like, wait a minute. He's like, you come from the luxury world of weddings. There's no way this costs X, Y, Z. And I was like, no, I swear it does. Yeah. And then like everyone was like, wait, what? And so then having a planner be like, Cory, like this is what I think, this is very much in line. Here's like other vendors. This is the range of what you can expect. Yes. Here's where I think we can save. And here's where I'd suggest to really splurge because X, Y, Z. And for someone to like not really have like, personal interest in which vendor we use. Right. And explaining it in a way that really resonates with the different parties involved. Yes. I think saves so many like fights or arguments just by not understanding it, because like you buy a dozen roses at a bodega, it's $12. So a normal person then sees a bill from a designer and you're like, wait, so how do you go from $12 to $1,200? And like, if you don't have a planner to really go through that, like, and a planner is expensive and I get that. But I think part of like knowing my stress levels and like running two companies and just my time is like, if we're going to get married, I want to enjoy it. Yes. And so at the very least, I was like, let's do a coordinator. And naturally, like we were able to work with someone who like, like it worked in our budget to have someone full time. And I just knew that like, my mental health is something that I really value. And so if that means that we can't have like many flowers, like that's okay, because I want to be able to enjoy it. And that's going back to like picking and choosing the vendors that like you really value and others where you find ways to compromise. And that's something that like stationery or whatever, like there's certain things where you're like, okay, let's save here. Right. But then let's like make sure we have someone to like guide us through this process so that we're not going crazy trying to figure it out on our own.
Yes, like maybe you don't need to have doves flying out of your invitation
maybe
box.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Things we could scale back on.
Exactly.
But yeah, you're right. That is so important to remember, like what is going to bring me joy through the process, because it is a celebration of love. And of course you want it to be beautiful and gorgeous and, all of the things that you've always envisioned. But if you can't enjoy it, it's not worth it.
No. And just going to so many weddings, I still remember the most sweetest bride, like probably a year into starting Beautini, sweetest girl. I loved working with her. So like just this like so kind. Yeah. And then on her wedding day, I still remember like the florist coming in and be like, all right, so where should I set this up? The photographer being like, okay, where can I shoot XYZ? We're doing the hair and makeup. And she like snapped and she was so stressed out. And she was like, arguing with her mom. And I was like, ooh, this is like just not the day that she probably imagined, because when you don't have someone to like tell everyone where to go or answer the questions. Like it really does fall on whether it's one of the brides or a groom or whoever it might be.
Yes.
Ultimately, it is a lot of times the bride because they're doing the hair and makeup. There's a lot more that happens in the morning. And I was like, ooh, she just spent so much time planning and so much money on this day. For her to now like be in an argument with her like parents is probably something that she's not gonna like want to look back on. And I just made a decision. I was like, I don't care like if we have $2 for a budget or whatever it has to be, like I want someone there on the day of because I want to be like the best version of myself.
Yes.
And the only way to do that is being able to like make sure that there is someone there where I can just focus on being calm, being in the moment. And I think sometimes that's really hard to do when you don't have people. And granted, so many people do weddings without a planner.
Totally.
I think it's just being self-aware and be like, can I do this?
Yeah.
I know that I get stressed out. And so again, like just being protective of my mental health, I was like, this is something that I need and other people's don't. And that's awesome.
Totally.
But it's figuring out like what works for you and what doesn't. And like making decisions as a couple versus like making decisions on what you need or what other people say you should do.
Yes. It's so important because when you do put that pressure on yourself, you will implode. Like your bride, like you hit a breaking point at a certain point. So just don't like make it easier for yourself where you can. Just speaking of pressure, I want to pivot a little bit actually right now. So we had a lot of listener questions for you in specifically the beauty space. So
wow.
because
I love this.
Yes. So because you're a bride-to-be.
Yes.
A lot of brides will kind of put this pressure on themselves like, oh, I need to like up the ante a little bit. Do you subscribe to that? Are you changing anything in your wellness, in your beauty routine, in your fitness, anything like that? Or what are your thoughts?
So I think that there's a balance, right?
Yes.
Like I think that you're remembering that your partner is like marrying you.
Yes.
And, I think sometimes people turn into skin and bones. You're like, who is this person getting married? And I don't like that just something that I want to look back and be like, wow, you feel so strong and healthy and like, you have beautiful skin. Like that's kind of like my dream. And so when it comes to like skincare, I do find a lot of clients maybe don't spend a lot of time to invest in themselves up until they get married. And so I think that the self-care moments are beautiful because then you're like actually learning how to take care of yourself in a healthy, beautiful way and finding products that work for you versus just like whatever you have. And so in that aspect, I think it's a great time once you're engaged and like getting excited for these pre-wedding events to like whether it's going to see a dermatologist or like playing around with different brands that your skin really likes is really important.
And then that's lasting beyond your wedding.
No, this is like it's like sometimes, you're like, wait, skincare is expensive.
Yeah, it's just like the push you.
Yeah, and so sometimes it's like, you know what? Like if you really want to like have glowing skin, that means less makeup on your wedding day.
Yes.
And this is something that's going to set you up post-wedding. I think it's great. When it comes to like working out and it's like, okay, I want to eat healthier. As long as it's done like, safely and like in a way, I think there's nothing wrong with it. And I actually have been working with a nutritionist. And I think there's a way again, as long as it's like done in a safe way or you bring in like a professional or whatever it might be, it's like, okay, that's great.
Yes.
But I do think that there's this tipping point of like, oh, I need to try this new procedure on my face, or I need to like lose this weight, or I have to like eat an apple a day or only salad and like that.
No.
I mean, granted, like I'm sure people say like the stress in itself is a diet, and I'm sure that's bound to happen. But I do think that like not changing who you are too much, I think is really important because that's like what makes you beautifully you.
Definitely.
But the skincare or like trying out facials and like finding someone who can maybe guide you and tell you like, you're going a little too much. Cause I do think that there's this level of perfection that like I quite frankly know that I'm gonna probably be like, oh, what do I do? I'll pay anything. Like, what do I need to do? Right. There's a lot of brides who are like, I want to try this.
Sell your soul.
And then you sell her like, whatever it is. Like, I don't care. Like, your money's not an object. And you're like, wait a minute, come on. But it's like, cause there's this pressure to like look absolutely perfect.
Yes.
And that's where I think having someone who even it's like your facialist or someone who'd be like, I would not do that, or like, let's not try that out until after your wedding, or like, hey, let's try out this kind of facial or this skincare product instead.
Yes.
I think keeps you in check when your emotions might get the best of you.
Absolutely. one question that I want to get to for sure before we end, because a lot of people had questions. You have iconic, gorgeous hair.
Oh, thank you.
It's so beautiful. And, style is subjective on
Yes.
the wedding day for a bride. But for hair care prep, like what should brides be doing leading up to their wedding to make sure it's in the best condition possible so that when it's styled, it's not looking crunchy, it's like luscious and gorgeous?
Love that. So I've been a huge component of hair masks and making sure you're not getting a lot of breakage on the end, let it grow. If you can limit your heat styling or using a heat protectant on your hair leading up to it, like that's a big way just to like protect your hair. I've honestly been using like Amra colostrum, which is like, honestly, I swear my hair has been getting longer.
I know.
And like, that's the only thing I added. My hairstylist told me to take that and I have. And who knows if it's that or the hair, like just taking like better care of my hair.
Like a mix.
It's probably a little bit of a mix. And then just getting dustings like every at least once a quarter, little trim, get off like the breakage so it doesn't like really split your ends.
Yes.
And just keeping it clean and like not like overwashing, finding the right products for your hair, just like your skincare. And just taking care of it, like trying not to get it too processed or too highlighted, but like it's a balance, right?
Of course. It's all a balance. Every episode, Brittany, we do a segment called premarital counseling. So our listeners, our brides, they will write in questions and we try to like give them a little advice. So I'll try to make it like a little snappy for them. But okay, this was a quick one and I actually pivoted it because this came in today and I was like, oh, this is perfect for Brittany. So we always change the names. We keep it on. We're going to give her a little advice. Okay. So we're going to call her Jada. Jada says, okay, this might seem really trivial, LOL, but I can't figure out what I want to do with my wedding hair. I'm stuck between a sleek Hailey Bieber bun and a soft blowout with front pieces behind the ears, a la Kim K when she married Kanye. I ultimately decided on both, and I decided to hire my stylist for the day of to change my hair into an updo for the reception after ceremony. My fiancé thinks this is ridiculous and says it's a waste of money. One of my best friends and bridesmaids is a hairstylist, so I was thinking of asking her to do it for me, but I also want her to enjoy the wedding and don't want to insult the stylist that I've hired. What would you do?
Oh, great question. I'd say don't worry about insulting people's feelings.
Yeah.
This is your wedding day. So whatever you think, like if you think your friend would do a better job, then go that route.
Yeah.
If you think your stylist would do the best job, like do that route. But we've had clients who come back to us after their wedding and they're like, you know what? Touch-ups or to transition look, they're like, it's like insurance. You didn't know you needed it until you needed it.
Yes.
And they're like, I'm so happy I spent that extra money to have someone on site just in case.
Yeah.
And so with this, I do think that you get one wedding. And if it is in your budget, or if you can make compromises anywhere else, I think that's a beautiful transition. Both are very timeless and you get the best of both worlds. Maybe tell your fiance, like, it's better than buying a second dress, right? So
my gosh, yes.
Price it out, show him the comparison. I think it hopefully will make him understand the different perspective.
They don't know. Don't even tell him if you're going to do that.
I'm like, honestly, I think it's going to be such a beautiful transition and whoever you think would do the best job in that second look, go that route and don't look back.
And now on to Honeymoon Hotspots, sponsored by Honey Fund, the #1 honeymoon and cash registry. Listeners of the Pre Nup get $25 added to their account when they register at honeyfund.com/prenup. Okay, I usually ask guests what their honeymoon recommendations are, but I am going to give mine today. And I have many, but I am going to list Lake Como for this one. And I'm just going to focus on Lake Como itself and visiting the different cities and towns around because it's just ultra romantic. It is the perfect spot for a honeymoon. I always say it's a destination that you do not want to go with girlfriends unless you want to fall in love with them. But it's a great place for you and your spouse to visit. So Lake Como would be my honeymoon hotspot destination for today. There were other things that we couldn't even get to today, so I am going to have to like reel you back in and get you back on.
I love this. I like love talking all things weddings. I'm like, you are like, I could talk to you for hours.
I could talk to you all day. You are so fabulous.
Thank you so much for having me.
Brittany, tell everyone where they can find you and Beia and Beautini.
So you can find me on Instagram. It's Brittany, BRITTANY.LO, and Beautini is BEAUTINI, and then it's Beia, beia.beauty. So BEIA.beauty. And please reach out if you have any questions. I can't wait to share more about the wedding process as we get further along.
Oh, I love this, Brittany. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform or on the Love Stories TV YouTube channel. Follow at _pre_nup and at Love Stories TV on Instagram for more. Have feedback or suggestions for the next episode? Feel free to reach out to us at podcast@lovestoriestv.com.